I'm having a bad day. I don't want to talk about that.
Right. Do you know, because you're from Texas, I'm from Switzerland. Do you know this saying that there's two things you don't talk about in America? You know which one they are?
Mm-hmm.
Which one?
Politics and religion.
There you go. All right.
And it's...
Yeah. Here we go, we start. And this is one of my, if not my favorite professor from LaGuardia, Dr. Trusso, that I took classes for philosophy of love, and also you were our advisor for PTK at LaGuardia College. Thank you so much for taking the time talking in my new podcast.
Oh, thanks, Sandro, for having me.
Sure, definitely. So, as I just explained, and as we know, this is kicking off with the last question of the last interviewee, which was my nephew, Dr. Lenny. And his question to me was when I was gonna spend a whole day with him again. And I have to ask you this question right now.
When are you going to spend a whole day with Dr. Lenny?
Exactly. You will have to answer this question.
Okay. When will you be able to spend a whole day with your nephew? Well, I am sure that will be a really happy, sunny reunion.
But when will it be?
But when will it be?
You don't know, right?
That,
Exactly.
I do not have a crystal ball.
I know. Well, you have a lot of crystal...
Oh, we have crystals.
What do you call that? Awards here.
Uh-huh.
But what do they tell you? When will it be? What do you think? Just a wild guess.
Wild guess. Do you want like a month?
Great.
Okay. I'm thinking mid to end of July. I don't know.
I think it's 1 month earlier, but
Okay.
you're very close. Hopefully. Fingers crossed.
I'm trying to get my psychic vibes.
I know, but I mean, close enough, right? So I know it's a difficult question because, children talk different than adults to a certain degree. What is your experience with philosophy and children, for example, since you're a philosophy professor?
I don't have a lot of contact with children, other than my niece and nephew. But I have a lot of vivid memories from childhood that I've connected to philosophy and like why I was suited to study philosophy, why I was drawn to philosophy.
Right.
So like and I think it's something about like the imagination that children have that they don't really understand time. I had this, there was this mirror in my living room behind the couch.
At home when you were a child?
When I was a child. Yeah. And so what I used to do is I would sit on the couch and I would stare into the mirror, and it was almost like a hallucination or like a daydream.
Right.
And I would look into my eyes, and then I would start to see different faces. Because
I had that too, to be honest with you.
That feeling of like, oh, I've been other people. And I was like, I had these memories. I was like, I remember I was a prince. I had a horse.
Right.
And it's just because the child's mind, it's not linear.
So, yeah, we're already going in a really interesting direction. It's not only for me time. Sometimes it was space as well. When me personally, I was, probably around the age of Dr. Lenny, to be, correct. I was looking at the wall and I didn't know if it was far away or it was very close to me. So not only time, but also space seemed to me very absurd.
Yeah, it is absurd.
Right? Is your phone ringing?
That's yours.
Oh, it is actually. Oh, this is going to be my next guest. And I will answer this phone in a little bit.
See, it's all
Excellent.
cyclical. It's all
Yeah,
like
it
tied
works,
together.
yeah. This is organic. Gimish, the podcast here. So, there you go. The live is on, back on. And there we go again. So, let's see. What could we ask you next then? We went through childhood. We have similarities. Let's say, let's go into art, right? You introduced me through your husband to the idea of Sprezzatura.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Do you want to say something about that, for example?
Sprezzatura. Just like easy style. I'm not as into fashion as much as Luke is. So that's all I have. I don't really know much about Sprezzatura, but
philosophy of aesthetics, for example, because you're teaching philosophy of love, an unbelievable class. Well, we already talked about that. And, whoever wants to see this can look at our interview for this class. But love, aesthetics, art is something that kind of connects.
yeah, and it connects to identity, like how we express ourselves, where we find beauty. I don't know, in terms of aesthetics, I think during the pandemic, my aesthetic has shifted.
In what sense?
I think I'm more sensitive
The idea of the aesthetic, or your personal aesthetic, or your taste of aesthetic?
I think my personal aesthetic.
Okay.
So you can see from my office, there's like a lot of stuff in here. A lot of like little...
Nothing I would
little
throw
things.
out, though, to be honest. Like, it's a lot of good things, so to speak.
During the pandemic, I came in here once and I threw a lot of stuff away, including like this big box of high heels that I had.
Oh, really?
And I don't wear heels anymore. I will not wear heels again. It's not something like it used to be part of my aesthetic, part of how I express myself.
And why was it part of your aesthetics?
There was something, I remember when I first started working here, that I wanted to express myself as like a professional and also someone who was like playful, but that really cared. And so I used to dress up. I used to have like almost like a librarian bun.
Right.
Kind of prim, proper. You have like the dress, you have the heels, and it made me feel confident. It made me feel like I belong here. I am a professor.
But that requires high heels, you think? Or back then?
At that time.
That was your idea?
It was you're like walking down the hallway and it feels powerful, like clip, clop. Like you have that little...
Right. You had a little noise to yourself.
And it felt empowering. And then...
This you threw away then at some point because you were like, that is not me anymore.
It's not me anymore. And I had this whole box in here of like beautiful shoes, but I had not worn them in so long. They were cracked. They were broken.
Do you think you could name the inference that made you doing this?
I think one of it is just physical pain.
Right. I mean, I don't know. I don't walk around in high heels. I can't even imagine it. But yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I have a long commute. It was a little painful. And then secondly, I didn't feel like I needed that to designate me as I'm a real professor. I felt like I don't need anything to prove that I belong here.
Right.
Except my connection with students.
I mean, because I've worked in fashion for long enough, and some of the argument why high heels have been created is to actually show or actually to express the feminine fragility and exaggerate it, which then, today we live in a fluid world, fluidity, gender fluidity, boys, girls are not supposed to be too much divided anymore. But then again, we have all these division problems. But an original statement was that, high heels will make the girl look even more fragile, which then will attract the guy even more. So she wants to be chaste and fragile. So you think you just overcame that? Like, I'm sorry, that's just something that came up in my mind when you said that.
There was something about, maybe 10 years ago where, I had a much more like feminine aesthetic, and heels was a part of that. And I think it was part of my ideal of, what a professional woman looks like. There was a lot of movies in the 80s about like professional working women, with their blazer. And I love a blazer.
And I love the 80s because we could smoke a cigarette here right now, but this is over.
I have a candle, if that would help.
It does not, it's fine. No, whatever. Yeah, exactly. Let's see this, because I just saw this book. Do you mind me if I pull it out? It seems to be so prominent that I just want to take it out. What is a bad argument? What do you think?
Bad argument, lazy argument.
Can you make an example?
I don't know. We were talking about children, so
I just saw this book behind me.
And it looks like a children's book, right?
And it looks like a children's book. Children can't make bad arguments. You would agree with that, right?
But they can also make really good arguments.
Exactly. But it's hard for a child to blame them. Well, that's a really bad argument, you 5-year-old, right?
No, I wouldn't want to,
exactly.
Shame them. But, sometimes parents don't make the best arguments.
Right.
They're not the best model. So, of course I understand, out of just exasperation and being tired, why should I do this? Because I told you so. That's actually a bad argument.
Because it's the argument of authorization, right?
Yeah.
Or authority, so to speak. It's like you have to read the Bible, you have to live by the Bible, and once you do all of this, everything is good. Well, why? Just because the Bible told you so, right?
Yeah.
That's a fallacy, yeah.
It's a really bad argument. And kids, they can understand basic argumentation.
What would be a good argument, so to speak? Because today I was supposed to speak with another professor that Nicholas Guerrera. He taught me logic. I had his logic class, and obviously arguments would have come up today. So I think I have to roll it over to you. Just because I saw this book.
You have to have one good reason to debate. You have to have one good reason. You have to be willing to debate, exchange, talk, listen to the other side. I think that's what makes for...
Empathy.
Empathy.
What would be a good argument? If you could make one good argument, what would that be? Any idea, right? Yeah, we're too scared of this.
It's too much. It's so
putting
open-ended.
the hand in the fire, not me, right?
Well, I mean...
Or the good precondition for a good argument,
Something controversial, where people can kind of recognize that there are reasons on both sides.
Being negotiating, you're able to negotiate and being able to, self-critical in a way, right? Never don't pull on a heartstring or so to speak. I don't know.
Don't try to manipulate someone into agreeing with you. If you really truly want to try to understand something, if something is right or wrong or true or false, being in that defensive position where you're unable to listen to someone, again, we're human, so there are times where you're not in that space, and that's okay.
Exactly.
But don't pretend you're in that space where you can listen to someone and be okay with that. There are times where it's like, I don't want to listen about your political beliefs. I'm having a bad day. I don't want to talk about that.
Right. Do you know, because you're from Texas, I'm from Switzerland. Do you know this saying that there's two things you don't talk about in America? You know which one they are? Which one?
Politics and religion.
There you go. All right.
And it's like, if we can't... these are actually the two most fundamental things we should be talking about. What it means to govern bodies of people. And we live in a democracy. Democracy seems to be eroding. If we can't converse with people with different beliefs, with different attitudes, with different convictions, how are we going to move forward?
We're not.
We
That
can't.
would be my answer.
Yeah, we're not. Democracy then erodes if we're not even able to listen to someone who disagrees with us.
Unless there is some genius coming up with such a great system that everybody's gonna say, forget about democracy, that's the new system, right? But as long as we have this, that's what we deal with.
Where does that system emerge from?
Exactly.
People
From some weird genius, I
debating.
would say. Exactly.
There's no weird geniuses out there. It's just us.
No.
It's
Yeah,
just people.
just you and I are the weird
Just you.
geniuses.
The world just needs this. That's
Yeah,
all.
exactly. No, it's fine. Yeah, no, I mean, and obviously, I don't know, like, what's the time now? Nah, we have a little bit more time. That's okay. We can go a little deeper. Is there anything you want to say to the world? Let me ask you the same question also that I actually asked my nephew, or not my nephew, my doctor, Lenny.
Oh, okay, yes,
Yeah,
Dr.
I have to
Lenny.
be, it's very hard to be, proper with this for him and for me. If you could ask anybody you want, who would it be and what would you ask that person?
If I could ask anyone a question, who would it be?
Like anyone physical, right? Like a person that you would know, like a famous politician, a famous sportsman, a famous fashion, whatever. Like anybody, who would it be and what would you ask that person? I know that might take a while for you.
Yeah, that's tough. I have so many questions for so many people.
What comes on mind first?
Malala. I don't know. It's so cheesy, but
I'm sorry. It's
Malala
okay. It's not-
Yousafzai. She
Okay.
so like right now, I'm working with the Malala Fund.
Mm-hmm.
She was an advocate for education for girls in Pakistan,
Mm-hmm.
and she was shot for it. She was shot in the head.
Oh.
She survived.
Oh.
And now she's kind of really advocating for universal education for all.
So we know
And
the person. What would be the question you would ask her?
what would I ask Malala?
And we will link that person in the
Oh, yeah.
descriptions. Yeah, we'll do that.
How can education make the world a better place? I'm an educator.
Mm-hmm.
I have to believe that what I'm doing does some good.
Mm-hmm.
Or I want to believe that.
Do you think education should be changed for that, or the way it is already
Oh,
pretty good?
it needs reform.
Reform, right?
The educational system, not just in the United States, but I think globally. One thing that I learned from the Malala Fund is that all girls in the world will not have access to education for another 100 years.
That's a big problem.
And I was shocked. But then when you learn, you see the kind of patriarchy, the misogyny, the roles that girls and women are put into from the very beginning of their lives, again, talking about children, it's very clear why that is the case.
Right.
But I would want to hear from her about what she has seen, from countries across the world, how education can do some good.
Right.
How maybe it can help people have difficult conversations, so they can talk about politics, so they can talk about religion without hating each other.
Yeah, I mean, I have two more questions for you. One is just relating to this. Like, if you could change education the way it is performed these days, let's say in the United States, because globally it's a different story anyway. So what would be the first thing you would change, if you could?
We need to bring back play into the classroom. Playfulness and a kind of teaching to the whole person. Not just memorize some material and take a test.
Right.
Because what does that do? It creates people that are really good at very small tasks, but have no critical thinking, have no sense of identity, don't know who they are, what they want, what is motivating them.
And since we kind of agreed earlier that a child cannot have a bad argument for the child's sake, it's kind of trying to get the child out of the adult more than it is right now, maybe. I don't know.
Yeah, no,
something like that, right?
There's
difficult
something...
task to push through. But some in this direction. Did I understand this right?
Yeah.
Yeah. I think so too. Yeah. And then yeah. Or do you want to add something to this before I go to my last question?
I don't know. I think that idea of like playfulness, it's not just for young people. It's not just for children. I wish we could bring this sense of like what motivates one to go through the process of learning and going to school.
Right.
How can we make the classroom more inviting, more inclusive, more meaningful, and not just one task among many that you have to do?
That only a few % will be able to perfectly fulfill in that sense, right? Yeah. Right, let's jump into the last question then, which you already know, which is,
okay.
I'm going to talk next to a good old friend of mine. He's not that old, but I know him since long enough. He's an artist, he's a designer, and what would you ask? What do you want me to ask this person next, as for a beginning question?
Okay. When's the next time you're going to the Andy Warhol Museum? Just kidding.
That's fine. No, he's not kidding. I'm going to ask him exactly that.
Okay.
And we're going to kick it up from there. Just like today. It's never easy, right?
Dr. Lenny inspired me.
Exactly. This is going to be an ongoing story. Thank you so much. Okay.
Thank you so much.